You know, former First Lady Rosalind Carter passed away recently. She was 1 year younger than my mother, the same generation. And of all the things that are being said about Mrs. Carter, which can also be said about her husband, there's never been a scandal or any indication they have ever compromised themselves before, when, or after they left the White House. And they would always show up at their little old wooden church in Georgia, Plains, Georgia, to teach Sunday school, working on the souls of America. They were always in the community. They never apologized for their faith in God, and I'm talking about them as one. And I can only imagine the former president's devastation at the loss of his beloved Rosalind. But man, you're talking about a beacon of faith, a beacon of godliness, cleanliness, and purity. Man, there will never be anyone who's ever governed like the Carters again. And you know what God gave her? Longevity. She was 96 years old. He is 99. What a blessing of longevity. Of all the legacies and all the accolades that will be bestowed upon them, longevity. And in good health, even when they put them in hospice, they still survive much longer. Nothing but the hands of God. And so we salute Mrs. Carter, and we pray for her husband, the former president of the United States. Welcome to this edition of Your Voice, Your Future Town Hall. You know, we try to bring you stories that people don't talk about enough. Kash Patel will be joining us soon. Are you familiar with this? The New York Adult Survivors Act, have you heard of it? Has proven itself to be one of the most destructive laws of all time. 2,500 lawsuits have been filed, and many against public figures. Just today in New York, Senator Parker had a suit filed against him, something that happened 20 years ago, not 2 years ago, not 5 years ago, but 20 years ago, by women who alleged that they were assaulted, raped, and when they were underage, not just for Kevin Parker, but for others. Now, of course, let me be clear. People who sexually assault people should be held accountable. But this isn't about the rapists or the child predators. You heard about Joe Namath today, and 50 years ago, and he's being blamed for something that happened at a camp that he has supervision over. These stories just keep populating all over the place. This is about every innocent person who will be caught in the crossfire, doomed to lose a case where they can't get any evidence to prove their innocence. This is about men maligning men, beating up on men, punishing men. Yes, this is what's happening. This is about the people who had consensual sexual encounters, who now will be forced to prove there was consent in that sexual encounter from decades ago. Now, any person, and I don't say this lightly, and I'm one of them, who ever stepped foot in New York, yes, I've stepped foot in New York very often, can now be told that they are a rapist or a child predator with no evidence against them. That's a frightening prospect. And it should scare anybody who lives or has ever stepped foot in the Big Apple. Kash Patel, your thoughts, and welcome to the broadcast. It's really frightening.
Look, New York is my home state where I was born and raised. I'm a Queens and Long Island guy, but it was a different time back then. And as a former public defender and federal prosecutor, it just shocks me that you can obliterate due process and reverse engineer crimes. I'm not saying we shouldn't go after people who committed crimes because they happened decades ago, but I'm saying that the United States Constitution requires a standard of due process and a presumption of innocence for any criminal conduct that is alleged against you, and this New York State law eviscerates that. I think there's going to be some serious constitutional challenges to this new law because it basically is championing the rights of people who may not have actually been victimized. And that's not the purpose of law enforcement. So to me, this is a really disturbing step, but it's one which we have been building up towards because the two-tier system of justice has splintered across this country at the local, state, and federal level. And now you're seeing legislatures in the administrative state participate along with the judges in the two-tier system of justice.
You know, Kash, I was listening to the argument of the three Democrats on the Circuit Court of Appeals about President Trump and the gag order. And it was a careful scalpel. Judges suggest that Trump's gag order in an election case may have gone too far. This three-judge panel, consisting of all Democratic appointees, suggested the gag order, Kash, may have gone too far in restricting Trump's free speech. Oh, my God, he's in the courtroom. His enemies are against him. And because you've tied him to this gag order, he has to speak meekly and mildly. He cannot defend himself.
No, Armstrong, we've been talking about this on your program for months and months and months. We have said from jump, these gag orders are unconstitutional. It's not about whether you like or dislike President Trump. It's about the freedom of speech in the First Amendment and the fact that he is running for the presidency. He cannot be abridged by a judicial officer because they disagree with his politics. Judge Chutkin, as we've delved into on this show, should have long recused herself from this case because she was a lawyer for the DNC and the Hunter Biden folks and the people who rigged Russiagate back then. She's now the arbiter of the faith of Donald J. Trump, the victim of the Russiagate criminal conspiracy that was a fraud at the FBI and DOJ. And the appellate courts, we've always said this, we're always going to come down. Even the Democrats, once this got there, we're going to come down on the side of the Constitution. And here's the thing, the gag order hasn't yet been reversed. It's been stayed. The three judges heard the arguments. They were sound in their judicial philosophy by saying the Constitution prohibits any sort of abridging of free speech, but they haven't issued an order. And my prediction is this is going all the way to the Supreme Court, irrespective of what they say, whether there's a scalpel or not. There should be no instrument, none whatsoever, abridging Donald Trump's free speech when it comes to any state, federal, or local court of law.
Since we're talking about federal here, Kash, a federal court, Kash, threatens to deal a death blow to the Voting Rights Act if upheld nationally. The ruling would further decimate the landmark Voting Rights Act law. Talk about that.
Well, look, the Voting Rights Act is so critical to our integral.
And Kash, I mean, they're saying only the Justice Department can bring these cases, not everyday citizens and civil rights organizations and individuals that have brought them in the past. That is astounding.
No, that is the police state going exponentially overboard. The Voting Rights Act enshrines our right to vote, the private citizens, whether it's in California or Oregon or Alabama or Maine. And at the federal, state, and local levels, what the Voting Rights Act has done is expand voting rights for individual Americans and has been able to allow private citizens like myself or yourself or every other American to challenge abridgments on the voting system that is done by the DOJ and the FBI and others. Now they want us to come in and tell us the cops who are the ones that are supposed to be policing the Voting Rights Act are the same ones that are going to come in and cut off your rights, and you don't have a legal avenue in the United States courts to vindicate your legal-ish position? That is outrageous to me. But again, we didn't get here overnight, Armstrong. We got here over years and months of a system of justice that's been weaponized and politicized, and people are finally waking up, including some of these judges who have issued some of the worst decisions in recent history. And I give you the Colorado case. Even that judge, no matter how bad she wanted to find Donald Trump and kick him off the ballot, even she realized that was unconstitutional. But of course, she took her pot shot at him and said, oh, you committed insurrection, as if that was her legal right to do so. But it gave the mainstream media the narrative they've always wanted, that Donald Trump did commit insurrection. And so that narrative will continue, a narrative which I believe is false.
You know, you are and have been in your past a master negotiator. Everyone is talking about negotiating the hostages with Hamas, the ceasefire, to release the hostages. I am not convinced that many hostages remain. What should be the path forward in these negotiations, Kash?
Look, as President Trump's leader on counterterrorism and hostage matters for a long time, and being in for 16 years, it's simple. You can only negotiate from a position of strength. You cannot give the enemy $6 billion like Joe Biden did and hand it over to the Iranians and the Ayatollahs and say, oh, well, that was their money from a long time ago. It was sanctioned because they've committed atrocities and crimes and killed American citizens and allies for decades. That's why we froze them out of the international banking system. And Joe Biden just said, oh, well, we'll give it back to you if you give us a few hostages. It's always to be cheered when Americans' hostages are returned home safely. But what you have to decide in that moment is, am I jeopardizing future negotiations? And that's what Joe Biden has done. Now he's talking about turning on a $10 billion spigot of frozen Iranian funds to try and get more hostages out. So what do? We've told the enemy in the Biden administration, if you take American hostages, you're going to get paid with a B, not an M. You're going to get paid billions and billions of dollars, and then that money is going to be utilized against American citizens and allies overseas. And look, in the Donald Trump administration, we returned 54 hostages from around the world, including Iran. We spent $0 doing it. We were hard tactic negotiators. We used our allies like Switzerland and other places throughout the world to leverage relationships. And that's how you release hostages. And of course, the ultimate kickstart or back kickstart is you need a threat of kinetic force to backstop your negotiations. And right now, the world does not see that under Joe Biden's leadership as the commander in chief.
You know, happy 81st birthday, President Biden. On your birthday, Kash, I have a personal message for our president. If you were to win this next election, you'll be 86 by the time you're out of office, my man. Don't try and fool the American people. At 81, you're already losing your cognitive abilities. We, at that age, will also do the same, Mr. President. I must tell you, Mr. President, we need a president who will be able to lead us with a clear head, and you know that there are better candidates out there than you. So my question, Mr. President, why are you still running? Why are you putting the American people, and including yourself, at risk? Is it for power? What is it? But let me say this before I go to break and come back. Despite this, 81 is a tremendous milestone. Congratulations to you. I wish you well, Mr. President, and we'll be back.
Well said.
And welcome back to the broadcast. Kash Patel is a former chief of staff to acting Secretary of Defense under President Donald Trump. Joshua Barnard, enterprise sales executive, and Victoria Churchill, who joins me in the studio, is a conservative writer, editor, commentator with Young Voices. You know, something phenomenal is happening around the country. From Portland, from Seattle, even in Seattle, where 9 city council members were up for re-election, only 3 will be re-elected because the city has woke fatigue, Kash. It's called woke fatigue. They don't like what's happening with law enforcement. They don't like what's happening to their cities. They don't like the destruction. They don't like the economic impact. So the swindling is swinging all the way back. Victoria, what is going on?
Well, I think you're absolutely right with the idea of woke fatigue. You know, I actually grew up in the Pacific Northwest and both Seattle, traveled to Portland quite a bit. I probably haven't stepped foot in the city in almost 10 years because I don't like what's going on. And I think a lot of other people, as you see what happened at the ballot box just a few weeks ago, they're feeling much of the same. They think that, you know, these radical policies, even though they like the sound of them in the beginning, they really don't like them in actuality.
Josh Barnard, one of the things, I was with you recently in San Antonio where we broadcast from the refugee camps all over the state of Texas, but particularly in San Antonio. What is changed? And just talk about the impact that Biden policies are having on the borders, the porous borders, and then how threatened we are by the fact that there's this new alert that Americans should be very careful because of the possibility of terrorist cells from Hamas, the Hezbollah, ISIS, who find themselves on American soil.
Yeah, I mean, Look, the impact can't be understated. We're in a full-scale invasion. This is weaponized migration, as we've seen throughout history. Since you were down here, it has tripled down, frankly, in terms of volume. We got a huge slug, I'm guessing, on the order of 80 or 100,000 Venezuelans since you were down here, many of whom have been redistributed through those distribution centers further into the interior. But many have now actually stayed put here in San Antonio. Just the other day, a citizen journalist was arrested at the San Antonio International Airport on public property for criminal trespass, and all he was doing was filming them unloading these buses of illegals. So it has become a police state. Essentially, the republic has fallen in many ways, and I don't say that to be hyperbolic as much as to let people know that this is not anything less than a full-scale invasion, and we're at risk of losing our country.
Were you surprised that Governor Abbott endorsed Donald Trump, and why?
I'm not surprised. He's taken a ton of heat because he's a globalist and a very weak, controlled opposition type character. And, he's a political animal, so he's got to play the game. And I think really his only chance at maintaining power here in Texas, a state that's quickly turned purple from our own internal migration from California and stuff, even with that, he was going to be overthrown even by conservatives around here. So he had to do something, and jumping on the Trump train is the obvious maneuver, I think.
I tell you, the biggest news for me, Kash, is that Milei won, Massa conceded. In Argentina, they were the mainstream media wanted to make us believe it was neck to neck. It could go either way, and it was a landslide. And he is as far to the right as I am.
Look, you're right, and we were talking about this at the top of the hour. These types of victories don't happen overnight. This has been something that has been building, as you said, in response to everything that is woke in whether it's America or Argentina or Brazil or Europe or England or elsewhere. All of these countries are seeing the dissemination of these policies that prioritize things that don't make sense or things that we don't believe in. We don't want crime. We want a secure border. We don't want fentanyl killing our youth. We want a legal immigration process. We want an economy where eggs don't cost $6 a dozen, and we want an economy where gasoline isn't through the roof. We also don't want to be in world wars. And they have now seen the policies that have all led us to this position. And Argentina was front and center last night with this monumental victory because they responded resoundingly by saying, we are done with this type of behavior. We are done with this type of two-tier system of justice. And we are done with the radical left-wing media dictating policies by headline. We want people in power who are going to put their citizens first.
Victoria, what scorecard would you give Speaker Mike Johnson today?
I think he's doing probably about a 7.5 to an 8 in my personal opinion. I think he's been able to kind of keep a lot of the people that opposed former Speaker McCarthy. I think he's been able to keep them happy to an extent. I think a little bit of frustration is being felt from conservatives kind of pushing the international priorities of the U.S. over putting Americans first. But I hope he kind of tunes into that and is able to have a little bit of a bigger focus on domestic policy and seeing, again, really, I think things that we've already talked about today, immigration, crime, I think those are issues that the Republican Party needs to focus on as we head into 2024. I think those are winning issues for the Republican Party, and I think there's, as I've said on your show before, there's a number of people, Democrats and independents, that are kind of sick and tired of hearing these promises from Joe Biden and his allies on the left and even on the radical left, and they're willing to entertain somebody that's going to give them a change.
Josh, I got to tell you, I was very shocked watching former Speaker of the House, Kevin McCarthy, making the case to impeach Biden, to move forward with the inquiry. He said he lied. He said he had no idea about his son's business dealings. That was a lie. He said he had no idea about the financial structure and how the money was channeled, which was a lie. And it seems as though that this new Speaker of the House is giving more attention to this, and it looks like this inquiry would go from inquiry to a full-blown impeachment hearings.
Yeah, well, interestingly, that seems to be more of a question for Kash. Like, I think that's right in his wheelhouse. I agree that the whole thing is bizarre, but while I got the floor here for a second, I wanted to go back to the migration issue and the fact that these folks are getting $2,200 a month. They've been invited here, and then they're paid to be here. And my biggest concern, and I'd like to get Kash's take on this as well, is what happens when the music stops? What happens when those payments stop? And we've now got 7, 8, 9 million dudes that literally came out of the prisons in Venezuela and other points, and the CCP trained operators on the ground, and the music stops. What happens?
Yeah, answer that, Kash. Then also answer about this renewed vigor toward Biden and impeachment.
Well, that's a great point. The monetary cost of this invasion through our border is astronomical. And we're just talking about the ones that are not criminals on paper as we see it. What about the known terrorists that have come into the country that Mayorkas and Wray finally admitted that they can't find dozens and dozens and dozens of them? My fear is those folks are going to collide with the other set of individuals that you just talked about when the money spigot runs out and say, we got money for you. We need you to do more crime. We need you to commit acts of terrorism. And the bad thing is they're well funded. They have patience, and it's going to lead to the degradation of our society. So our law enforcement needs to be completely revamped. And on the Speaker Johnson thing, I've known Mike Johnson for a while. Conservative, Christian man of faith. He's one of the nicest guys I've ever met, but he has a lot on his plate. If you are a pro-Trump person, the release of the January 6 tapes alone makes Mike Johnson a savior and a hero. And if you are just pro-justice, as I am, you would think, I want all the evidence for all of America to see, and then they can make their decisions about January 6th. And in terms of the impeachment inquiry, look, we all know even if they impeach Joe Biden, he's never going to convict in the Senate. But the importance is the trial that takes place in the House of Representatives will allow the Republicans to utilize subpoena power, call witnesses, produce documents, and get this material out into the American bloodstream, the bank records, and everything that the mainstream media immediately disposes of just because the Republican majority in Congress has put it out. So there's a lot of value to it, but that is going to be a ton of work for them in Congress.
Kash, let me stay with you for a minute. From a defense perspective, how significant is the issue of handling classified material, and what are the potential ramifications for national security?
Well, anytime classified material is gotten out, whether it's by accident or illegally, it hurts national security interests. Now, I'll be the first person to tell you, one of the government tricks of the trade is to overclassify information, to overclassify to cover up corruption. As the Deputy Director of National Intelligence, I was the guy that went in there and said to DOJ, hey, this is evidence of innocence against Michael Flynn. I don't care if you like him or dislike him or not. Why are we breaking the law by classifying it? We declassified it, and you know what happened. Those types of instances, they did the same thing during Russiagate, cripple our system and Americans' belief in our ability to classify what needs to be classified, what doesn't. And then when you have two presidents, essentially a president and a candidate for president, out there running for the office, and they're both essentially being charged or alleged to have held classified information, I think most of America is just kind of fed up with this process that DOJ has yet to definitively identify what is going on under the law. And to me, it's because of the two-tier system of justice. These cases will be handled differently. Joe Biden won't be charged, and Donald Trump has been charged, even though there's two different privileges that apply to a president versus a vice president.
Let me ask you, Victoria, I discuss the importance of data security in the corporate world and how it parallels with government classified information.
Yeah, I mean, I think that they are two slightly different things, and I think that that has to be acknowledged. So corporations, they have kind of a understanding that you have as a consumer. You sign things that kind of waive away certain elements of your privacy whenever you interact really with any kind of service, right? Most of us don't read those terms of service, but they do exist, and that kind of expunges the corporation from certain sets of security that you might otherwise kind of think that you are entitled to, but you just want to check the box to move along and use whatever service you're signing up for. Now, with the government, that is, I think, made to be a little bit more in the open, and what we kind of have as consumers in a government sense, that is the citizens. The government is obviously ran by our tax dollars. It is ran, by a lot of bureaucrats, but also a lot of elected officials that put those bureaucrats into power. And so that's why I think there is a very unique distinction between government safety and security of secrets versus those that you can expect from the corporate world.
We'll come back with Kash, Victoria, and Josh. I'm Armstrong Williams. This is Your Voice, Your Future. Don't go away. And welcome back to the broadcast with Victoria Churchill, conservative writer, Josh Barnard, enterprise sales executive. So let me follow up on this. You would be surprised at what's going viral today. It's not some funny dance or prank, Victoria, Josh, but it's a letter from Osama bin Laden to America justifying terrorism. And guess why? Because apparently writing a 4-page justification on the killing of innocents is eye-opening, and that's why. And you are actually reading this, and it's changing their perspectives on war. Look, let me be clear. War is a complicated endeavor. One thing you learn is that there are very few evil people in this world who act knowingly that they are evil. Instead, most villains, Victoria, believe that they are heroes. This is what Osama bin Laden thought, Josh, and apparently there are young people who recognizes his perspective. There is no justification for killing another except when they are directly threatening you. Terrorist attacks like 9/11 are unjustified. There would be no issues in the Middle East if its leaders simply allowed their people to live in peace if they didn't commit atrocities in foreign countries. Josh, your thoughts?
Look, this is a sensitive subject. But one thing that I think we need to acknowledge is that the number one rule in war is to know thy enemy. Everybody should read Osama bin Laden's take, should watch that video that he made back in 2001, early 2002, where he goes over these points, if for no other reason than to fully understand what it was that was the modus operandi, what drove, what the catalyst was for them. Not arguing that it's right, obviously it's a heinous criminal act. But the point is, we are derelict in our duty as Americans and patriots if we do not do everything in our power to understand where it's coming from, what they believe, all of these things. And yet, in this instance, we see it censored heavily. Like even, I just had the full text up the other day when we were talking about it, and that those servers have been attacked and now has a CAPTCHA wall that won't let you get by it. I've had several other archived versions. I mean, here's the thing. In history, lies are not censored. They're not censored. It's very easy to dispel lies with real evidence, right? The things that are censored are truth. And this was Osama bin Laden's truth, something that we should understand in order to fight this level of evil and to understand what drives it overseas. And, I know it's not popular, but that's what I believe. Every person of all ages should read it.
Victoria?
I think that we have too many people with too many opinions on the internet that have those opinions that come from places that are not ones of knowledge, that are not ones of knowing history. And I think that really this day and age, we as people my generation and younger, they are not taught history because it is seen as sensitive. And so the people that write curriculum, whether that's at the K through 12 level or at the collegiate level, they want to fit their curriculum within a kind of certain set of ideologies that they want to push forward onto the next generation. And that is why only by being exposed to ideologies that make us uncomfortable, we can really gain a broader understanding of the world, whether that is this letter, whether that is, Hitler's Mein Kampf, whether that's Mao's Little Red Book or Karl Marx's Communist Manifesto. Those are all papers which are kind of the basis for a lot of radical ideologies that we have seen throughout history, really for the past 100 years, and people need to understand where this comes from. None of this comes from a silo, and that is why I'm always in favor of education. I think that, censorship again, really pushes one kind of ideology, and people are prevented from knowing other truths. And without that, they really end up with a myopic worldview that they kind of see as the end all and be all. And then when something else pops up that they didn't even know about, they act like it's this great grand thing that they should have been exposed to much earlier on. And, one thing that I found quite notable about this letter is that, for a lot of these people, especially Gen Z and younger, or I guess probably about from the cusp of youngest millennials, which I'm kind of right on that cusp of Gen Z and millennial. But for a lot of these people, they don't remember 9/11. They weren't even born when it happened. They don't know the fallout that America experienced right after. And that is really kind of a generational moment that when you talk to people, whether they're in their early 20s or younger, or kind of, I'd say, mid-20s and older, that is a generational divide of remembering 9/11, remembering the towers falling, and remembering what happened in America afterwards. And so some of us have those memories and some do not. And so for a lot of them, it is the first time they're being exposed to this. And I think it's good that they are exposed to it.
So Josh, you read the letter from Osama bin Laden. Does it justify 9/11?
Of course not. But what it does is it informs us as to why there's that level of anger for a human being to build an army to lash out in that way. And the reason I believe it's censored so heavily and is fought so hard against, and questions like, does it justify? I mean, let's face it, that's a patently ridiculous question. Of course it doesn't justify. That's not what's at hand here. What we're looking at is censorship because of fear that people will start to understand that our foreign policy drove this. Sure, it's heinous and not justified, but it still was our foreign policy. And then people start asking questions like, why do we occupy Iran and protect the Aramco facility? And why did we reinstall the princes of the House of Saud from the French Riviera in 1971 back into Riyadh? And the petrodollar compact, well, was because we bankrupted ourselves in Vietnam and guns and butter failed. And now we needed this new currency, the Federal Reserve note, to be backed solely by crude oil, which is why all that happened. It's why the occupation started. All of this history then, is in front of people. And that scares the powers that be, mainly the central bankers and spooks that do this kind of censorship. Because then people start saying, you know what, well, it doesn't justify any of this, and we should hunt them all down and kill them. At the same time, why are we spending almost $1 trillion a year occupying 138 countries with guns?
But listen, everyone knows America does not have clean hands. We all know that none of us are pure. But as Boris Johnson said right after the savage attacks on Israel on October 7th, America usually gets it right and correct itself. America does not intentionally go out and just kill people in mass just for the sake of it. And whether people die because of America's shenanigans or not, America at the core has been good and has been the power, the superpower that has sort of held the glue together for the world. It does not advocate where you have somebody like Hamas who believes they can go out and just rain terror on not just Israelis, but people around the world, and they're going to get 70-some virgins because they have this distorted view and this distorted perspective and understanding of what they call their religious indoctrination. So no matter how much we look at America, we may frown, because I think this is part of the issue with the protests now. They can't see the good of America, so maybe they didn't live during that time, and now they're being indoctrinated in these colleges and universities, and they're being fed this indoctrination by the Russians, by the Chinese, and by everybody else who wants to totally destroy America from within. And so you have to be very careful how you balance this propaganda. And when you read what Osama bin Laden is saying, while there may be truths within what he's saying, you must understand what his true agenda is the destruction of America, because it threatens their view and how they want to shape the world. Victoria?
Yes, like I said, I think that when we promote one certain kind of ideology, we don't open people to know, we can't say that we are right if we don't say who we are right against. And so I think if we compare that to saying, this is our, again, as Josh was just saying, we have to be able to compare, not just say America is good because of X, Y, and Z. We have to say we are good because of X, Y, and Z because this is the alternative. And so without knowing the alternative, I think people are a lot more reluctant to latch on to the idea of American exceptionalism because they see, which, I don't agree with this, but they, see oppression, they see racial conflicts, and this is kind of the myopic view that they have. And so again, for me, I think it's the people that come out saying, their LGBTQ ideologies for Palestine. Like, they don't know what would happen to them if they actually lived in Palestine.
But Josh, there's an ideology that's anti-capitalism. They believe that everybody economically should be equal, and that's just impossible. It's not just the issues that you're talking on in terms of what's in Osama bin Laden's declaration, but it's about how these globalists want to see the world. They despise capitalism. They despise exceptionalism. They have a resentment against achievement. They want to make everybody equal by taking from those that work hard and give it to those that work less, and those that work less cannot appreciate it because they didn't earn it.
Yeah, no, it's Marxism. Like, our real struggle in this country right now, as we've all been saying here, is that there's been an indoctrination of our youth, or at least, even running up to the millennial era. I think myself and Gen X might have been the last group that consistently said the Pledge of Allegiance and had any type of tie to the Republic and the Constitution at all. But with that said, we've lost, and we haven't lost to Islamic terrorism. We haven't even lost to our atrocious foreign policy that has driven a lot of this Islamic terrorism into our nation and on our soil. We've lost to Marxism, which took over our educational system. It took over our corporate hierarchies, and it's done it slowly, just like the Chinese said they would. It's a 50-year plan, and we're 40 some years into it now. And we've fallen to communism and Marxism. And the whole thing with Osama bin Laden's another distraction, and it's something that the Marxists are using to fuel the flames with these young, uninformed people who have just bought, the Little Red Manifesto, hook, line, and sinker, and think, to your point, like, no meritocracy, everyone gets something. That's why they don't worry about this invasion. The reality is we can't feed and provide jobs for these people coming across the border, and many of them are out of prisons and all kinds of, foreign operatives and stuff, but all that's covered up because these people do believe in Marxism. They believe that everyone can have everything.
And Victoria, that is just impossible. History has shown that. History
has shown that. I think Mao's Little Red Book or Karl Marx's Communist Manifesto, those are not history books. History, as you pointed out, shows us something very different. These are ideological people that attach themselves to an idea that they want to implement, but again, I think we even see this just with any public policy that we want to implement. I personally debate this with, people that are into policy versus politics, right? Policy is never applied, never in reality like it is prescribed. And so you need to understand what actually goes into making that policy. And a lot of the times, if people that work in these ideological spaces like universities, they don't actually know what goes on in the real world. If you've worked for a university for 35, 40, 45 years of your job and you've never held a job in corporate America, or you've never held a job in a small business, you only know what you hear about in your internal echo chamber. And again, that's not necessarily the kind of university itself, but it is, you go to symposiums, whether that's in the country or globally, and you interact with people that have ideologies that are very similar to you. But if you've never seen and lived the opposite, you don't have anything else to kind of fall back on.
Earlier on the weekend, I had an opportunity to go to the D.C. Armory to witness Operation Give Back. It's just sponsored by Ransom Mills for the last 28 years, and what they're doing this time during Thanksgiving is just phenomenal. You're going to take a look at the conversation I had when we covered this on Saturday, and much more as we continue Your Voice, Your Future, as we lead up to Thanksgiving. If you believe every child is deserving of a quality education, please go to educationjusticefoundation.com. Roll the Thanksgiving tape. I'm Armstrong Williams, and welcome to the Washington, D.C. Armory, where we're attending the 28th annual Project Give Back. This is a project that has been going on for 28 years, founded and operated by Ransom Miller. He started out feeding a family of 5, and it has turned into feeding 5,000 families for 1 week leading up to Thanksgiving.
I think it's so important because it's needed. Everybody who's went to get gas, went to the grocery store, got their light bill, got their gas bill, you've seen an increase, and that increase hasn't followed through to people's paychecks. We're really trying to grow and expand. We're in Virginia, Northern Virginia right now, another at Clinton Baptist Church. Sidney Harrison in PG County is doing 800 boxes that leave here.
It is something that should be done all across America, giving back, making a difference in people's lives with the simple thing. I'm Armstrong Williams from the D.C. Armory and Project Give Back.
My dream is that on the Saturday before Thanksgiving across this country, things like this will be going on all across the country.
I just think it's so phenomenal that this young man, Ransom, started out with 5 families 28 years ago, just giving away turkeys. And here we are, 28 years later, he and his wife and their organization, they just don't feed a family on Turkey Day. They provide enough food to feed families, 5,000 families, for an entire week, for 7 days. I mean, I must tell you, that is heartwarming. That should be everybody's story. I was so happy when Jan and her daughter, Ronette Adams, introduced me to Project Give Back, because that's what we should, how we found the best of all of us. And to see thousands and thousands of people in my city being fed and they were happy, the smiles, the laughter, because someone actually cares. Because I think we forget how much people are really suffering around this country. And I mean, they were giving away carrots, simple things that we take for granted. It was so heartwarming to see just how thrilled people were to know that someone cares. And I just wanted to celebrate Mr. Mills' example, and I hope that becomes an example for all of us across the United States. Dante Simpson is joining us. He's an expat. Well, Dante, welcome to the broadcast.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure. Thank you so much, Armstrong.
Isn't that wonderful, giving away an entire week of food to 5,000 families?
Yeah. And I love that you said that it's not a one-time thing for them. It sounds like something that they continue to do, and they say that, you can change the life by feeding a village. And it's beautiful to see what they're doing. That's an amazing story. I commend them. And it's a husband and wife doing it. It's even better. So it becomes a family tradition for them, and they get to increase their own family by who they help in the D.C. area. It's a beautiful thing.
Now, tell us about SPAT TV. I know a few things about TV, but I'm not familiar with it. I assume you tell us.
Yeah, absolutely. We started ESPAT. We've been around now for about 4.5 years. We're going on 5 years here very shortly. And we were built under the inspiration of a moment on a major network. It was actually BET, I'll be quite frank with you. There was a moment that Tyler Perry won an Icon Award for one of their award shows. And the statement that he made was, we can continue to ask for a seat at the table, but I'm in Atlanta and I'm building my own. That moment became a moment that became a movement in my life. And we were able to start ESPAT TV. The model is that we started in the video game industry prior to the pandemic, and obviously the pandemic hit, and a lot of people were away from their TVs, but a lot of kids were in front of their computers. They were on their games. And we had a captive audience during a time where the world was in a very difficult state. They came to us for an opportunity to escape. So we have since built the nation's largest content production studio in the video game space. I come from music. I come from fashion. We had a chance to mesh worlds in the gaming culture, working with people like Travis Scott and Lil Nas X and a bunch of other folks, bringing them together in Roblox and Fortnite and a lot of different games, and bringing a new face of entertainment in the world of gaming to traditional and non-traditional consumers.
You know, it's one thing to have someone serve as an impetus for you, and you have an epiphany. How were you able to make your concept, ISPAT, a reality?
When you're starting new, I've seen a lot of different people do it a lot of different ways. Our model was, let's go find some very cool big brothers in this space. And we went and did that. And we went and partnered with what we now call the ISPAT Collective. The very first person that we went after was a Hollywood icon by the name of Ridley Scott. If you're familiar with American Gangster with Denzel Washington, or a litany of other films that he was a part of, Gladiator and
King
so
Arthur.
More.
He did the King Arthur film.
He did the King Arthur.
I love King Arthur by Ridley Scott. Yes, go ahead.
He's a legend. He's an absolute legend. And you figure that we went and tapped into him and his family in the Ridley Scott Creative Group, and they were our very first partners. They are our oldest partners, and since then we have 11 additional studios that operate under our umbrella in this gaming space, and it created tremendous opportunities. So you know how it is when you're the new kid in the school, right? You go look for you look for your village. We did that. We created our village. And business came along with that, whether it was Marvel or DC Comics or so many other opportunities that found themselves. And to be quite honest with you, Armstrong, one of our missions is, let's identify these Hollywood icons or these developers or these creatives, and let's align them with folks in the DMV area. Let's align them with folks in Compton. Let's align them with folks who may not have an opportunity to work with the Microsofts of the world or put on big screen today. And let's give them that opportunity. We know that our communities, birth some of the most creative people that this world has ever seen. Let's actually start to marry that creativity with opportunity. And that's what our model and motto is as we continue to grow this brand.
With your expertise in ISPAT TV, how are emerging technologies like streaming and esports reshaping the landscape of global business and entertainment?
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny. I remember a time when that was considered nerd culture, right? Long ago, the video game industry was considered nerd culture. Now it's actually cool culture. If you're trying to promote anything, a product, a film, a project, you want to come and connect. One of the things that esports has done, one of the things that the gaming community, whether professional, whether you're a hardcore gamer, or whether you just kind of come in, interestingly enough, just to kind of peruse the environment, the reality is that they have created community in digital spaces. Gaming was born in analog, it was born in digital spaces, and that is something that gaming does better than most anybody, is create community in digital spaces. So they weren't being picked up on TV. What happened? They created Twitch. They weren't being picked up in audio spaces. What happened? They created Discord. Now everybody wants to go to Twitch. Now everybody's on Discord. So you're seeing that they are creating their own home, and now they're welcoming other industries and markets into this space. We're seeing music come. We're seeing film come in major ways. So they are, gaming as an industry has mastered the art of creating community. And now we're starting to see the Verizons of the world, they want to have community around their next product launch. That's why there's, people lined up in front of the stores when a new iPhone comes out, because there's community that's waiting for that product. Well, the same thing happens with gaming. And they've done a tremendous job. I haven't seen anything like it outside of that tech space, phones when they're lined up, or the new Jordan sneakers when they come out, when they lined up. Same happens with these video game titles when they come out. Folks are lined up around the virtual corners to purchase and be a part of these new game titles.
How can someone access your platforms in the 30 seconds we have left?
Yeah, absolutely. They can come on to espat.tv. get a sense of what we do, and they'll be able to find all of our stuff there, whether it's Twitch, whether it's Discord, all access to what we do. And, you know, we always say the funny part, and I'll leave you with this. I've got 30 seconds. So I'll say, if you're watching the Super Bowl this year, the biggest entertainment property that this nation has, you'll see it on your major network. But if you flip over to Nickelodeon, you'll actually see it this year on Nickelodeon. That's us producing that. So we will be the first Black-owned studio that's a part of a Super Bowl production, which will be the Super Bowl production on Netflix. Next time you're in a movie theater and you're watching trailers and you see a trailer come up for a video game, that's us. We actually own that contract. So that's what we do.
And congratulations, and thank you for watching. I'm Armstrong Williams. Make sure you follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at Real Armstrong Williams. Congratulations. Happy Thanksgiving week. Stay safe and sound.